Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So I get a lot of questions from folks about how I either read so fast or how I read so much. So I thought that I would just make a quick video in the spirit of faster and more. A quick video talking to you guys about how I read as much as I do. So last year I read right around 300 books. I think my all-time high was 400 or 450. More typical pace for me is 200 to 250, but like, girl, that's a lot of books, and that's more than most people read. Totally get that. So I wanted to talk about a few tips I have of how you can improve your reading speed and just generally how you can read more. And I should just say, guys, these are tips about how I have improved my reading speed and how I have read more. I am not an expert in terms of like speed reading or anything, and I just want to be really clear that this is what has worked for me. If you want to have somebody teach you how to speed read, that's not what I'm going to talk about in this. Okay, thanks, bye. A couple of tips on how to read faster. So first of all, if you are somebody who is reading purely for information or for school or work or something like that, you just need to like get something into your brain. A great tip that I got from one of my professors in grad school was that when you're reading something like nonfiction-y, the best way to read it is actually sort of coming from both sides of the book into the middle. So read the introduction first and read it carefully. Read the conclusion next and read it carefully. And then from there, in each chapter, read the opening and closing paragraphs or sections, and you can read the middle part a lot faster. Basically, most nonfiction is structured like an argument. So in the beginning and the end of the book, it will tell you what it is arguing, and that will give you sort of the overall like structure of what you're reading, kind of the architecture of the argument the author's making. And that means that you can read the rest of the book a lot faster because you get the bigger point that the author's trying to make, and everything else can just be sort of like filling in details. So that's a great tip if you are needing to read something for school or whatever. That's one of the best ways to kind of improve your ability to get through things. Another tip on how to read faster, and I am by no means, by the way, like a speed reader or a speed reading expert, but I do think that some of the principles of speed reading can be applied to faster reading that's not technically speed reading. And what I mean by that is one of the key tenets of speed reading is learning to let your eyes travel over the page in such a way that you've trained it to pick up the words as it's going, but you're not kind of scanning the page in the traditional way we're taught to when we're kids. And I still definitely scan the page, but I essentially through practice have a lot more confidence in my ability to scan quicker and to be picking up the details I want to pick up on. Now, I should note that I don't apply this for every reading experience. There's some books that I really want to sit and like focus on every single word and really like dwell in it. But another tip in terms of how to practice reading faster is if you read a lot of commercial fiction where you're not necessarily reading for like detailed, beautiful descriptions, you're reading much more for plot and for character, that's a great thing to practice kind of trusting your ability to scan across the page a lot faster. So that's a tip that I would have is focus on trying to trust your mind that it's picking up all of the words and try to make your eyes travel across the page quicker. And like I said, I think a great kind of way to practice that is with commercial fiction where you're not as worried that you're like missing some of the key things that you're coming to the story for, if that makes sense. So that's another way that I think I've improved my reading speed. And then the last one that I think is sort of on reading speed and verging into the more, but I think that practice is the bottom line. So part of why I read so much is because frankly, books are my main form of things that I consume in terms of media. Like I don't watch a lot of TV, I don't watch a lot of movies. Like I do, I enjoy them from time to time, but like on a day-to-day basis, I probably have some YouTube on in the background or some music on in the background, and I'm reading in the evening once I'm kind of finished with my day. If you take the time to practice, and part of what's in your mind is like you're wanting to read faster, I think if you give yourself time to practice over time, you will see an improvement in terms of how fast you're reading. So I would recommend for, like I said, I think commercial fiction is a great way to practice improving your reading speed just because of the nature of it. But another thing that I think is great to practice on are short stories because it kind kind of gets you in the habit of completing stories in a shorter amount of time. And I think that's another like just sort of like mental thing that people have to kind of overcome or like work through, is that I think people think of the idea of finishing a book in a single day or a single sitting as being something intimidating or hard. And it's not, honestly, especially if you're picking things that are a little lighter and easier to get through. There's no reason why in short order you couldn't be able to read a 300-page commercial fiction book in an evening. Now, of course, I'm not speaking to anyone who has any kind of learning disability or whatever. I'm just talking about if you're a casual reader and trying to improve your speed, completely an achievable goal to practice and get to the point where you can finish a story in one sitting. And like I said, I think short stories kind of like help you get in the overcome some of the mental barrier I think people have to being open to thinking that they can even do that. I don't know if any of that made sense, but I do find that short stories are a good way to sort of like practice completing a story in a short amount of time. And I think mentally that can like have some level of transitiveness to other reading experiences, just in terms of like your own expectation about how much reading you can get done or how much of a story you can get through. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, now bridging into kind of between how to read faster and how to read more. So one key way to read more is to get on board with audiobooks. Now, I know there are some people out there who will tell you that audiobooks are not reading. I don't have a lot of patience for those arguments. Now, if you want to say that it's activating different parts of the brain to hear those stories versus reading them, like I'm not opposing that, but like literally if you look at the history of literacy, the idea that having a story read aloud to you wouldn't count as reading means that like most of human history people had not read books because mostly it was an oral tradition. Like it's just I find that argument to be really coming often from a place of self-importance. So like that's just my personal pet peeve when people talk about audiobooks. Also, for those who cannot see, audiobooks are amazing. I used to do volunteering with an organization that created audiobooks specifically for people who had seeing difficulties. So all that to say, I'm not here for the argument that audiobooks are not reading. I do think you have to find the right audiobook for you in terms of like what will work for you of hearing a story versus reading it. Because like I said, I totally acknowledge that it's kind of two different parts of your brain that are processing the story. And I think that you have to figure out what works for you. But if you have an audiobook going at all times, you will find that you will get through more books in a month because you can listen to it when you're doing the dishes or driving or whatever. And it took me a long time to realize that something that was keeping me from reading as many audiobooks was the fact that I didn't like listening to it at normal speed. It's too slow for me. I almost always listen to audiobooks at double speed. So if we're talking about a 10-hour audiobook, it usually only takes me 5 hours to get through it. Now, sometimes depending on the author's narration pace, I will slow that down to like 1.5, but a definite way to read faster and more is to listen to audiobooks and to listen to them at faster speed than normal. 2 last tips on how to read more. One is essentially embracing your tropes and what you like and reading mostly that. I think people who try to make themselves get through books and who are completely unwilling to DNF, and that's a personal choice, but I do think that if you're reading something that you're not really enjoying, you're not going to get through it as fast, and you're also not going to read as much because you're struggling to get through something you're not really enjoying. So like knowing yourself as a reader, knowing what you do and don't like, and really just being like unashamed about like, hey, I love fantasy settings with mystery plots, and that's all I want to read. I think there's nothing wrong with that, and you will find that you will read more and faster because you are really enjoying what you're reading. If you're like me and an omnivore, it's less of a thing because like I pretty much like reading almost anything. But if you're somebody who has specific taste, like lean into that. You will enjoy what you're reading. You'll read more. And then finally, in terms of reading more / faster in terms of like this giving you an opportunity to practice, always have a book with you guys. Like you will be amazed at where you can find like 10, 15, even sometimes 20 minutes in your day-to-day life where you get an opportunity to read a little bit. And I always have my Kindle with me, and I also have ebooks on my phone. So like that's how I have my book with me. But like, yeah, you know, waiting at the gas station to finish filling up your tank, or waiting online for something, or waiting at the doctor's. I mean, like we do a lot of waiting in our lives. And I think if you have a book and are attuned to the possibilities of taking those moments to read, instead of like look at your phone, which is my alternative path, you'll find that you'll like sneak in like another book. Like I usually have what I kind of think of as my purse book, and it takes me usually like a month to get through it, a couple of months, but you can 100% get through a few books a year purely just by having it with you and reading it in your sort of random moments throughout the day. So like I said, I am by no means an authority on speed reading or how to read the fastest you possibly can or how to maximize it. These are just things that have worked for me. I have seen my reading speed increase a lot over the last, I'd say 5 years. I would attribute that almost entirely just to practice starting in grad school, because I had to read so much and get through things so quickly that it was sort of like speed up your reading or drowned. So that was a huge piece of it. But like, these are just some things that have worked for me. And like I said, I am somebody who reads a lot these days. And I think a lot of it just boils down to reading pretty quickly because I read a lot. Anyway, that's my answer to how to read faster or how to read more. I'm sure that won't satisfy everyone, but that's my take on it. Definitely let me know if you have thoughts or opinions about how other people can read faster or how they can read more. Definitely let me know in the comments. But anyway, I think that will do it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that will do it. I hope you're having a really lovely day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye.